Alright, I want to introduce you to jQuery today. So some of you have used jQuery for your first project. I think Corey is the only one who managed to get that taken care of, right? Yes? Yep. So you used a plugin. It was some sort of Lightbox plugin. So let's go ahead and have a look at the file. So on D2L, there are two files that are of importance. So often get this question. What do we need to do? And so this is your answer. So you don't have to ask that question. So just pay attention. I know college students are generally so broke that they can't even afford to pay attention. Ha ha ha. Ha ha. So there's this jQuery section here. So this first one, let's see if I'll rearrange it, I'll put there. This is just a general instruction on how to connect to the library. So you'll need to read this first. So there are two things, like this is how to connect to the library. This is the exercise, which is not a how-to, so you really have to pay attention to do this exercise well. I'm going to grab those. All right, so first of all, jQuery is based in JavaScript. So when you're working with jQuery, you're working in JavaScript. JavaScript is a very old computer scripting language based on something called EMAScript. Flash works on EMAScript as well. So they're interchangeable. So Flash calls theirs ActionScript, but it's just a version of JavaScript. Okay, so they're interchangeable. And I only tell you that in that when you learn JavaScript, you're actually learning ActionScript or vice versa. So you're not just limited to one use by investing some time into JavaScript. So essentially, JavaScript enables enhanced interactivity from HTML elements within a web browser. So HTML natively doesn't have interactive features. And when I say interactive, I mean elements hiding, elements showing, elements animating in, elements changing depending on what a user clicks. So we all understand that as what interactivity means, right? Some user response, a user clicks, they get a response. Generally, it's animated in some fashion, or something changes independent of just swapping to a new page. Is that clear? Yeah, that's what I mean by interactivity. I would boil it down to manipulating elements. So it's cool, you get to be manipulative. So JavaScript enables you to manipulate those. Meaning you can turn them off, you can turn them on, you can hide them, you could show them, you could swap them, etc. So always consider it that you're manipulating those tags.
Isn't that what CSS does, though?
CSS changes the appearance and does manipulate its appearance. CSS3 actually can do some animation now, which I'd be happy to show you. So there is that feature in CSS where you can actually manipulate tags over time. Not 100% browser compatible yet, so I don't invest a lot of time in discussing that. But it's some cool stuff. Supposedly better rendering than jQuery with a lot of effects. But yeah, conceptually, yes. What you know now still remains true. HTML holds the content, CSS is for appearance, JavaScript is to manipulate those elements. So they still remain true. You select tags through CSS, you select them with JavaScript the exact same way. Okay, so we're just building up. We're not erasing anything and starting from new. Does that make sense? Excelente. All right, so jQuery. jQuery is an open source JavaScript library that streamlines and simplifies typical or repetitive processes that are a bit of a pain to do in raw JavaScript. It's also seamless and handles most of the cross-browser compatibility issues. So all of the library's been tested across browsers, so you're insured you get some sort of insurance that it's going to work similarly between the browsers. There are always occasionally some exceptions to that, but for the most part, it is cross-browser compatible, which is great. So it's a handy tool that allows us to use JavaScript to manipulate HTML tags. There are other ones. There are other JavaScript libraries such as MooTools and YUI, but jQuery seems to be the one most folks use. It's the one that I use, but they all work similarly. So once again, they're all manipulating JavaScript in some way. So if you know one, you pretty much know the other ones, or you would know how to learn the other ones. Okay, so once again, jQuery is not is not a language in itself. It's a library that manipulates JavaScript. JavaScript lives in each and every browser. So there's a little box conceptually that a little motor sitting in all of the browsers, and if you tell it to do something with the right language, which is the script, it will do it. Okay, so that little motor is sitting in every single browser. Does that make sense? So when you're scripting, you're sending that motor commands, and that it's saying, you're just saying basically, hey, hide that tag, and it'll go okay if you say it in the right way. Does that make sense? Okay, lives in the browser. Flash is similar, except it's plug-in based, meaning you have to download a Flash player to use Flash. I'm sure you've all done that before, right? You open up YouTube, it says your Flash player is out of date. Well, you want to upload the new one, and you say okay. And so it is not integrated into the browser like JavaScript is. It's not open source like JavaScript is. And it is soon dying because Apple killed it. Flash, I mean, okay? Good thing about jQuery and JavaScript, it runs on all the mobile devices as well. And so you don't have to worry about, cross-compatible all the way through to the mobile devices. In fact, the mobile devices are actually more sophisticated because they're newer and they're based on the newer browsers. So you actually can do more things more often than not with a mobile browser. At least I have found. Okay, so this is how you do it. jQuery was written by a group of people. I wish I had their names. But it's an open source library written by external folks. So it's not written by a company. Looks like the links are blocked here, so I'm just going to click the link to the library. Okay, so I'm just going to type in jQuery. So if you invest a lot of time in this, people write plugins for various interactions, it's always a good idea to say, well, man, I've used this for years. Maybe I should donate a little bit of money, $5-10 here, to ensure this keeps going. Because once again, it's open source. It's written by just like-minded folks contributing to the library, which I think is great. It's something I don't have to buy to use. But I do donate to them from time to time. If I really use a plugin quite a bit, I try to toss them some money. So I would too. So if you go to, I would do that if I were you, I meant to say. So if you go to jQuery.com, there's this big brown button that says download jQuery. If you click this, it provides several links. How do we know those are links? Side question? They're underlined. Yeah, so they're using a convention. Okay, so you can download these files. It says download the compressed, download the uncompressed. Here are some release notes. So if you click this, you basically get the jQuery library. This is a very long JavaScript file. It's just written in JavaScript. You have access to it. You can go in there and change it if you wanted to, if you really knew what you're doing. And right now we're in version 1.91. I'm telling you that because it's kind of important. Now you can download this and link it to your file. Link it to your files just on your computer. Does that make sense? So it's just like a CSS page. You have an external CSS page. You can download this file as an external file and just link to it and have all the power of that library. Yeah? It's not my preferred method. It's good if you don't have an internet connection because you can you can test, etc. Without an internet connection if you do download that. I'm going to just show you how to link to the hosted. So if you look here, it says using jQuery with a CDN. I know we're not used to reading, and I'm not saying that as a criticism. I don't read a lot of web content if I don't have to. We're all busy people, but it's probably important to read these things. I do highlight some things that are important for you to read. But a CDN essentially is a hosted version of the library. It's just sitting on a server somewhere, and whenever you open up your website, it goes to that server and downloads it. Now, have we used anything that works kind of like that? Anyone make any connections to other technologies that we used in the past, where something is stored on the server and we're going on and getting it?
Pretty much everything. And that's just pretty much how the internet works.
Well, it is how it works, but some files are local, and some files we access remotely, right? We connect to it remotely, so we don't actually download those files to use them. Anybody remember? We've used them. FTP is just the process of uploading and downloading, so not the same. Because when you FTP something, all those files are relatively linked. They're not remoting out to a different server to go get any information. Okay? Anyone? It's with Google. Google
Fonts?
Yeah, Google Fonts. We do that same thing. We go out to Google Fonts, and instead of us downloading those font files and hosting them ourselves, Google says, hey, we'll handle that for you. So anytime you need that font, it'll shoot it down to the user from their server. Make sense? Same process here. We're doing that with this. Now there are two tags, and if anything has a tag, it looks like a tag, then that means that goes into our HTML page. Does that make sense? So this shouldn't be copied and pasted into a JavaScript file. It shouldn't be copied and pasted into a CSS file. It has HTML links, and so it goes into an HTML file. So if you look, we can connect to them remotely. Google will also host these libraries if you want to do that, and or Microsoft also does this as well. But it looks like they've partnered with a server company called Media Temple for so they could host this remotely for all of its users. Okay, I'm going to crack open a Dreamweaver file. So the first bit, no jQuery plugin, nothing in jQuery will work without a link to the library. So that's the first item of note. I don't see anybody scrambling to write that down, so I'm assuming everybody has photographic memory. Or they will ask me again, and I will be disappointed in this universe's school system, which they've convinced students that they do not have to write notes to remember anything. So I'm going to paste this into my document. So where in this document would I paste it? Would I paste it in the head? Would I paste it in the body?
Head.
TJ says head. Who can gather why TJ says head? So TJ said, someone else say, well, why did TJ say that? Anyone?
It's where you link pages.
It's where you link pages, okay? Yes, you link CSS pages there, right? What did you say, TJ?
Because it's not visible.
Yeah, the user doesn't need to see it. It's not an element that the user sees. Elements that the user needs to see it goes in the body. Okay, so I'm going to link, I copied and pasted those script tags. One is the jQuery library, and if you read the bit about migrate plugin, they've essentially made some significant changes to the library, and so they've discontinued some of the functions. We'll talk about what functions are in a second, but they've discontinued some of them, but they've created a migrate plugin so you can use older plugins until the older plugins can get rewritten for the newer library. So more often than not, you'll have to link to both the library and the migrate plugin, okay? Or the migrate library. All right, so those two are linked. Questions thus far? I'm going to go ahead and just save that. And I'll just index. Okay, so I called this index. All right, so no JavaScript or no jQuery will work without being linked to the library. That's rule number one. Will not work unless you're linked to the library. And it must be topmost, meaning these two must be in order and they must be top of any calls to that library. All right, so now I'm going to create an external JavaScript file. If you look at my list in Dreamweaver, there's a JavaScript option. Really, it's just a blank page with a comment that says JavaScript, so no big deal. I'm going to save as. Notice it's .js. Does that make sense? For dot what?
JavaScript.
JavaScript.
So wait, I'm sorry. I was writing down. Did you open up a new and make a new CSS or a new?
I just said new, and JavaScript was one of the examples. It really doesn't matter. This is just a text document. So the only thing that matters is the things that I type in here and the dot at the end. So I could always change this and make it a JS file at any time. It's really nothing sophisticated about that. More often than not, you've got a lot of JS files, so I recommend organizing them into a folder called JS. It's very typical. A lot of the demos that you will be downloading if you want to use a jQuery plugin will have them in a JS folder. So I recommend going ahead and doing that. Normally I name this something I normally name this master. Sometimes it's called script. But this is just my local JS file. So I kind of use the same convention as I do with a CSS page. So I'm going to save that in that JS folder. Okay? So now it's open and saved. I went ahead and closed that. So linking to that. So if you're linking to a CSS style sheet, use this little link down here. Don't confuse this process because it's different. You must use a script tag. But in Dreamweaver, there's a handy insert bar. And one of those says script. Yeah? Insert script. So if it's toggled with one of these, you might get confused about that, but it's in the common category, script. All right, now it's going to ask what type, and it's going to be text JavaScript. And then the source, notice that little folder. What's going to happen when I click that folder? Anyone?
It's going to be browse.
Yeah. It's going to bring up the it's going to bring up my Finder window, and I'm going to go ahead and find that file. Notice this says JS/master. Now, is that a relative path or is that an absolute path? Relative. That's right. You guys are just jamming today. Yeah, so I need to double check that and make sure it doesn't start with file dot / user / your name / / name your flash drive / something else dot / right? Because that's crazy. We always go inward and we always look for the remote or the relative path. All right, that's all I need. I'm just linking to that. We'll say OK. And notice it looks exactly like these. The only difference is that the src attribute here is a local one. This one is an absolute path, starting with HTTP. Absolute, all of the files and folders on the server. Relative path, these are local. Make sense? So this is on my computer. Now, note, just like CSS, you can write CSS in the head of your HTML page, right? You can write CSS right on an element if you wanted to. You could use the style attribute and write it right on an element. Just like that, jQuery works the same. So you might be working with a plugin that actually calls it in the head here. It's not a great practice, but you can do it. And there's really no difference between that setup. Just make sure that you know, like, okay, I'm operating just in the top of the HTML page, or I'm operating in an external document. Okay, works the same way. This way is just a little bit more cleaner, a little bit more convenient, a little better. Okay, one thing that I forgot to mention is that to make sure that you're connected to these libraries, you want to double check to make sure that these links are correct. And if you look, here's jQuery 9.1, so these little tabs have shown up. If I click that, then I get access to the library, and I get all this gobbledygook. Pretty cool. Here's the migrate plugin. I get all that gobbledygook. And then here's my version, no gobbledygook. All right? So this is just telling us that we are linked to those libraries. All right? If you don't see that, you're not linked correctly, and do not pass go until that problem gets solved, or that solvum gets probed, as I was wanting to say. All right? Okay. Questions thus far? Must link to the library. Check your link. All those links go into the head. Create an external JavaScript file. Link that to your HTML page. Nope. All right, we're moving on. All right, functions. I think you should know what a function is. Function is basically a command. It does something. It's an action. Okay? I would like to tell you another term. Object. Objects are things. Nouns. Did I say adjective? I meant verb. Action words. Verbs.
You said object and then
Objects are nouns. Functions are verbs. Action words. Things that you want to do. Does that make sense? They're commands that you send. Basically, everything that you tell jQuery to do is in the form of a function. You'll say hide this, show this, switch these around, make this plugin work. Those are all in the form of a function. Okay. The things that you manipulate are objects, and those are tags or elements, HTML elements / tags. Those are known as objects. Okay. There are some other types of objects such as audio files and video files that are like tags or represented as tags, but they're not necessarily something you see, especially audio files. So there can be objects that aren't tags. Okay? But anyway, so back to functions. So the first most important function that you should know is that this money sign, which is a shortcut for go out and select an object. Money sign. It means it's a function that says go out and select an object. Functions are always followed by 2 parentheses. Okay? Inside those parentheses is information that function needs. Okay? So this money sign, open parentheses, close parentheses, is a function. And that money sign means go out and select an object. Okay? So guess what it needs inside this?
attribute.
It can target an attribute, but really conceptually, what is it wanting? What does it need to know?
Alright, what it's gonna do.
Yeah, what it's going to select. The object. Like, go out and select something. Okay, what? That's what it wants to know. Okay? So the topmost object is called a document. Okay? That's where everything lives. It's basically the stage. It's called the document. So this is an object. It's your brute object that surrounds everything. Conceptually very similar to the body tag. Does that make sense? So this is saying go out and select the document. Yeah? Okay. Now we're going to attach another function to it. You attach functions by pressing the period. So dot. And notice that Dreamweaver, a good reason to invest in Dreamweaver, it does have all these helpful things. Like it has a list of all the functions that you could possibly do once you select an object. And the topmost function, where everything else lives, is called ready.
What does the period do again?
It basically connects them. This is known as a dot syntax, and it connects those two. So it lets the script know that you want this document to be connected to this ready function. Okay? So money sign document dot ready. Guess what that does?
It's ready.
It gets it ready? Good guess. Very close, but not quite.
It's ready to execute the next function.
Oh, I'll take that. It's when the document is ready, meaning when the document is manipulatable. So when it's ready, do this, which means like a document has to be downloaded. So basically enough of it has to be downloaded before anything can be manipulated. And so when it's ready, then it starts to do stuff. Okay? So you can see that's important. You can't call and manipulate objects until the document is ready. Does that make sense? Because you go, hey, do this. And the document's like, I'm not ready yet. And then your chance was, you only get one chance. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I wasn't ready. Sometimes I'm ready, but I'm not ready yet. So this function just waits until the document is ready. I'm going to put a little keyword called function. And basically, this is just a little wrapper that means, just like a function, it means do this. Okay? So function means do something. So all of this is that. So let me write it a little bit clearer. Okay. So when the document is ready, like there's the open parentheses, close parentheses, do this function. So you see this over and over and over again. So it's kind of like a syntax. I'm sure HTML was a little hard to get used to. Same business with jQuery. You're going to have to just get used to the syntax. I'm certainly here to just want to make sure that's recording. Looks like it might still be. We'll see. All right. So the document ready function. When it's ready, do this. So at this point, let's just review. I've got a link to the library. I've got a link to the migrate library. And then I've got a link to my external JavaScript file. And that must happen in order. This is using document ready. And this is where document ready lives. And so this has to be loaded before I can manipulate anything here. So they must be written in order. Does that make sense? If the library is not loaded and I'm using something from the library, then I can't use it because it hasn't been loaded yet. All right, so I'm just going to put an alert. Always do this. Spell it right. Alert. Now, it says alert, and there's an open parentheses and a closed parentheses. So what is this? It is a function. Yes, anything with a keyword and open parentheses, closed parentheses is a function. And essentially, we're going to tell the browser to do something. So this is a keyword, money sign. Most of the functions have actual words. And so they often describe what they're doing, like hide, show, find, etc. So alert will just give us a little message letting us know that everything's working so far. Does that make sense? Everything's working so far. Working, right? Always do this. If it does not do this, it's not working. And there's no point in putting any more in there, okay? So we just go through the steps again. We check to see if this library is linked. We check to see if this migrate is linked. We check to see if our external JS file is linked. And then we always do this alert working to see if it's working. So just like I had said before, watch this work, even though I said it won't work. I'm going to try to load these out of order. So notice I put the link to my external JavaScript file above those two links to the libraries. So let's see if it works in this. It does not work. Right? Document ready has not been loaded yet. The library has not been loaded yet. So I told you. I told you so. That's what I'll say. And I'll be right. Okay, let's have it just manipulate something for an example, just so you can see how this works. Any tag can be targeted and manipulated. Absolutely any tag. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to just put div id equals test / div, and I'm going to just put test in there. Maybe make that an H1 tag. H1s are so beautiful. Times New Roman, size 100,000 in bold. It's my favorite looking tag. Okay, so always save and test. Don't ever move until you're clear on what's going on. So we got that working. There's my test. Once it's working, it's pretty annoying to have that alert pop up all the time. So I'm just going to comment it out. We've probably talked about comments before, but once again, there's this little helper here in Dreamweaver that allow you to apply comments. Comments are just notes that you can highlight things or say this is that. It's a way of organizing or communicating between two developers. So it's always interpreted as just a note or text. So that's a convenient way of disabling. The JavaScript comment, there are two. This is the most easiest one. 2 slashes, it turns gray. That means that's disabled. So you can write comments in HTML. It's a little different. It's there. It looks like this. And they're not interchangeable. I don't know why, but they're just not. CSS is / fuzzyball / between the two things that you commented out. That also works in JavaScript. Okay, so let's just have it hide. Let's have it fade out. So I'm going to select this ID. Okay? So let's go through it. How would I do that? What function selects objects?
Tag.
What function?
Oh, the $sign.
Dollar bills, y'all. I thought it was funny. I don't know, I went for it. Okay, so you write any object, like when you're referring to a tag or an ID attribute or a class attribute, you write those in quotes.
Why does it say no syntax errors across the top?
Well, let's deduce that. Why do you think it says no syntax errors across the top?
Because there's no language screw-ups yet.
Because it was saying before, like, when the tag isn't complete, like it's telling you that the tag isn't complete.
So as you're typing, like if you type something wrong, it'll try to pinpoint that. It'll turn red beside there. There's a little Dreamweaver bug associated with that. I'm sure you will run into that. But see this little red, like, number sign? Right now, currently, this is not completed. And so it's trying to tell me, hey, man, there's potentially a problem here. And if I don't type it correctly, it won't work. And so Dreamweaver's helping me out with that. It's trying to tell me, hey, man, this is not going to work. It's kind of annoying. I wish it would just wait a couple of seconds before I get done typing, before it makes that assessment. So I'm going to type the object in quotes. It could be in quotes, double or single, does not matter. And I want to select this ID attribute. So how do I select ID attributes in CSS?
Still be the hashtag.
Hashtag. Corey was going to say that, right? So notice Dreamweaver's helped me out again. That's pretty cool. It says, hey, I know there's one selector out there, so I'm going to give you that one as an option. So number sign test written in quotes. This means go and select that object. So I'm going to pass just a very simple function called fade out. I'm sure we can use the powers of deduction to know what that's going to do.
Assume too much.
Okay, did you see it fade out? We'll just refresh it. Fade out. Go away. Yes?
So when do you so fade out is a function,
It is a function, right?
and it's the parentheses that tell me it's the function.
Absolutely, and it's connected by a dot, you know. And this can be, information gets passed in between these two. So just like this, it's like what do you want to be manipulated? This one has optional information that you can pass to it. The keyword for that is argument. So you pass arguments to functions. So we've talked about objects, functions, and these are called arguments. I think really hold on to the idea of objects and really, really hold on to the idea of functions. And if you want to know, these things are called arguments that get passed. So if you look, it says duration, easing, callback. So duration means how fast you want that to happen. It's written in milliseconds, so 500 milliseconds would be half a second. So I want that to take half a second. So you can pass optional parameters to these things. You can say, I want it to take longer, I want it to take slower. When you're done, I want you to do this. Does that make sense? All those variable information, those are known as arguments. There we go. So that took half a second. Let's make it take 2 seconds. So 2,000 milliseconds. It's just taking.
Would it be 2 million?
No, it's not millions. It's in the thousands. I don't know why they're called milliseconds, but they are. I'm telling the truth. 1,000 milliseconds in a second.
Oh.
Not a million.
Wow, yeah, I just went
2
by-
million would be a long way. So like 5 seconds.
A second.
You're absolutely right. So there it goes. Okay? So we're manipulating those objects. You can do them on click. Let's set that one up. So this is all beyond what really we're doing today, but I think it's all helpful information. Hopefully you can get excited about this. So let's say I didn't want this to happen until I clicked the word test, and then I wanted it to fade out. So I would select test. Make sense? So I'd use that select, and then I would use the click function. I see that?
So it'll still work even though it's been commented out.
It won't work. No, I just commented out. So just to focus you where. So on click, I'm going to choose this this handler one that just has that function already in it. So that's just like this setup that I had here. Just means do this thing. Okay, and what I want it to do when it click goes between these little curly brackets. So the curly brackets are the definition of what you want to happen when that happens. Does that make sense? When this gets clicked, so this is a function, do this. Okay, so it needs to happen between the curly brackets. What else uses curly brackets?
CSS.
Yeah, and CSS has those properties. It says do all this stuff that's in between these two curly brackets. So that should be similar. We've been exposed to this prior. So I'm going to copy and paste that fade out function inside those two curly brackets. And so now it will not work until I click it. Make sense? The other one, it was just getting triggered on document ready. Now it won't work until I click it because it's in between those two curly brackets. I call them seasoned curlies. Ready?
So, what's the purpose of the actual close parentheses after the curly bracket?
Because the click, if we take all this out, it's the function.
Oh, dang.
Does that make sense? So it's the end of that function. So it does get a little convoluted, it gets a little complicated, but it does make sense. It's the end of that function. So all functions, all information to those functions get passed between those two parentheses, and so it's passing this function as an argument, what to do.
So it's similar to those angle brackets in the...
Yeah. Kind of an opening and closing, sure. So this would be the opening, and this would be the closing of that element metaphorically, or yeah. Okay. Same here. If you look ready, right? There's that function what to do when you're ready, and then there's a close parenthesis there, closing out that function. And if that gets lost or the syntax gets out of order, it will mess up. So now we're not going to do anything until it clicks. So it's not doing anything. I will click it, and it starts to fade away. Okay? Yes?
So can you put like a click inside of a click?
What does that mean?
Like I know on a lot of websites, when I was like going through some scrolling websites to get ideas, and a lot of them, a screen will pop up and it says click here to enter, and like you click it, and then that fades out, and then the website fades in.
Sure.
Like that, like how they'd be doing this.
Sure. If you look at that,
say click here, something fades out, while something else fades in.
sure. Let's set up something to fade in here. Div, not dov, but div. So we would say ID equals content. So this is where the real fun stuff gets to happen. You really start to feel that you have a little bit of power when you start to learn these things, because you discover that it's actually pretty easy, and for two, it's actually pretty awesome to be able to do this stuff like on the fly, just to be able to turn things off and on, and that gives you a whole open realm of design opportunities where with print or with just standard web design, you're just locked into the page, or you're just locked into one page at a time. With interactivity, you have a whole nother ball of wax in terms of a design element, interaction as a design element. So it's actually a beautiful thing, something extremely fun to work out. It's like, I really like it because you have to. So I like it because I get full control over it, and I get to solve little puzzles and problems, which I like to do. I like solving problems. I like problems because I like to solve problems. It's a good thing to say in a job interview. It always works out. Okay, so let's have this not fade out the text, or we can fade out something else, fade in something else. So the first thing I need to do is I need to hide that. I need to make sure it's away when it gets started so I can fade it in. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I want that to happen when the document's ready. So when it's ready, make that go away. Does that make sense? So let's select it and make it go away. So I'll just do that on document ready. So within this nesting here. So money sign to select, and then
pretty much everything that we're going to be doing, you don't have to set up a new selector because it's already the whole document is selected, so everything's just going to fall within that initial ready.
Yeah, everything happens within that document ready. Yeah, it does.
That makes it easy.
Sure. But it also kind of makes it a little complicated. So I'm going to I'm going to select that content. It's got to be written in quotes. And then I'm just going to say hide. So I'm going to use the hide function. No parameters passed. I want it to hide instantly. So I only do one thing when I'm working with script. And until that one thing works, I don't move on. Does that make sense? So if this doesn't get hidden, I know I'm screwed up somewhere. And I just concentrate on that until it gets solved. And then I learn quite a bit in the process. So notice it's not there. Right? It did hide. Okay, so I can use show. There's a show. But why not just use fade? Guess what the other one is to make it fade in?
Left.
What's that?
Left.
No. Fade in. He's messing with me. So once again, I don't want test to fade in. I want content to fade in. Does that make sense? So when I click test, I want these two things to happen. I'm going to get rid of that stuff so we can just see. When I click test, I want the test to fade out in 2 seconds, and I want content to fade in 2 seconds. When the document's ready, I want content to hide. Make sense? I think so. Okay, so when I click that, it fades out and that fades in. Sweet. Yeah?
Did they take each other's spots, or did one just fade in on top?
Once it's completely faded out, it has no properties, and so just like any tag, it's going to pop up, which is a CSS problem at that point. That makes sense? Okay, now if you really get into this stuff, we do get into it a little bit more in Web 2, and then scripting, or it's now called interactive applications. We really get into it. Okay, so that'll be junior year. But this is the taste. This is the touch. This is the first intro to it. All right, so when it comes to plugins, let's take a break. We've all been working pretty hard, so let's take a break. We'll come back in 5 and get the conclusion to this.